Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 diary entry. Can't remember if I posted today is a Monday. Can't remember if I posted one on Saturday or not, but here I am on Monday, having skipped Sunday, and we are still working on the long diary entry of the 7th November. I don't know how you feel about it, but I love the long entries. Those are definitely my favorite. Dmitri really saves what he has to say for these long diary entries. Okay, so our recap. It was part 2 of the long diary entry that we did last time. And he had started out the diary entry by talking about the bad news that was sourced to Reuters, that the Bolsheviks had triumphed, full stop. And then he provided an alternative view sourced to some kind of quote-unquote official telegram that had been received by General Baratov in Kazvin, which was the headquarters of the Russian troops in Persia. And Kazvin had gotten this supposedly official telegram and heard from other sources that everything was great in Russia, that the Bolsheviks had been defeated. And Dmitri believed that second alternative was true because of the fact that, according to information he had received, the ruble had surged in value against the pound sterling. So he was basing his interpretation of his conclusion of on the situation really solely on that. Okay, I thought I would just say a word about a pattern that you may have noticed with Dmitri, and that is, in his long diary entries, he always starts from the broadest possible perspective, and more or less dispassionate, not always, but a broad view of events. Then he starts narrowing his focus, and then finally, he ends by really narrowing his focus and zooming in on himself and personal issues. And I don't know if that tells us anything about him as a person, or if he had this pattern outside of writing his diaries, that he tended to approach life in that way. Well, first let's look at the big picture, and then let's focus on certain things. And then let's focus on ourselves, or I will focus on myself. I don't know, but it's an interesting thought. Okay, let's dive in. I am deliberately detailing all the rumors to demonstrate clearly what chaos we are living in, but I have not abandoned hope that the Lord God will take pity on the Russian land, on that land that was once called Holy Orthodox Russia. But as soon as the thoughts, even for 1 minute, dwell on the information from Reuters about the fighting in the capitals and that Tsarskaya has twice passed from hand to hand, the blood just freezes. If it is true, then what was going on with Papa? Where was he? One might truly go mad from all these thoughts. And what was going on with my poor, unfortunate friend Laming, living in Petrograd during these days? I have had news of Maria from Eder. His brother, who is in old Michin's service, wrote to him from Kislovodsk. He says that they are waiting for my sister and her husband, or that she has already arrived there. If only this is true, then thank God. All the better to be further from all the horrors of civil war. At least then things won't be so terrible for her. And then there is a possibility that she might come to Teheran. How wonderful it would be to see her. My God, how desperately I want to talk with her! Exclamation point. Returning again to the events in Petrograd, it is interesting to note that, judging from the information brought by Rawlinson from Baratov's headquarters, it turns out that power, as I said, has passed into the hands of Kaledin and Kerensky, and Kerensky has fled. Okay, I will interject here. What he meant to write was Kornilov. power has passed into the hands of Kaledin and Kornilov. Okay. And Kerensky has fled. If this is true, then it would be interesting to know why he is in hiding. Was he really just a provocateur who deliberately brought about what happened and is now afraid of being caught? Oh my God, when will we receive more precise and detailed information about the state of things? In the Baku newspaper Caspia from 31st October, there are reports from Stavka that the uprising has been suppressed and Petrograd is in the hands of government troops. But despite that, information has come in from Reuters that is so horrible that it forces one to doubt whether Kerensky has actually won or not. Of course, it's absolutely impossible to pass along all the rumors that are circulating in Petrograd from quasi-official sources, but one thing is incontrovertible, and that is that in London, the ruble exchange rate has gone up. And that is, of course, a strong and accurate barometer of the internal state of affairs in Russia. And for the time being, only financial information is reliable, and it, for the most part, only confirms the rumors that are circulating in opposition to the information in Reuters. Okay, that's quite a big chunk, but that's all right. Let's go through it. Where am I at here? Let me see. So, let's talk a little bit about Dmitri himself and how he functioned. Again, this commitment of his to looking at different sources, comparing sources, weighing sources. My hat is off to him. Well, I'm not literally going to take it off, but he's doing exactly the right thing. He may be reaching the wrong conclusions, but he's also not ruling out the idea that he's wrong about that. Okay, his reference to the Russian land, and more specifically to Holy Orthodox Russia, which he says once called Holy Orthodox Russia. He has a tendency, therefore, under the surface to believe that the worst is true, that the Bolsheviks have taken over, because Russia under the Bolsheviks can no longer be outwardly Holy Orthodox Russia. Anyway, this is interesting. This is what was instilled into him since the time he was a little boy. And even though we know that he's actively pursuing new thought, philosophy, and looking into esoteric spirituality at this time, he still sees orthodoxy as foundational and holds this idea that many other people did, that because Russia is Orthodox, it's holy, and because it's holy and Orthodox, God will not abandon it, even no matter how bad things look. Still, there will be intervention from God, because God will not abandon Holy Orthodox Rus or Holy Orthodox Russia. Okay, I'm interested in what he has to say about Paul. So Paul and his wife, when they returned with their children to Russia, this is Grand Duke Paul Alexandrovich, Dmitri's father, they had a new house built in Tsarskaya, and that was where they lived. And so Dmitri is particularly concerned about the fact that Tsarskaya has been a focus of some fighting, that it's changed hands twice, and what happened to Paul during that fighting. He doesn't, did he know that Paul was under arrest? Was Paul still under house arrest at this time, or had he actually been imprisoned? I'm not sure. I should have looked that up. I kind of dropped the ball on a couple things this time. But, yeah, Dmitri is not going very far in being curious about that. He's wondering what happened to his father during the fighting in Tsarskaya. But he's not really, asking that question. Well, where is he in general? Has he been arrested? Well, maybe he couldn't let himself think about that. That's possible. And then he refers to his poor, unfortunate friend Laming. He doesn't say poor Paul, for what it's worth, but although he has in the past, but poor unfortunate Laming, and not only that, but he calls Laming his friend, which he has also in the 1917 diaries. This is the man who essentially raised him from the time he was 10 years old. That was his task, to be there day to day, to make sure, that he's fed and goes to bed on time and has, everything he needs in terms of clothes and dental care and all this stuff. That was Laming. But now Dmitri is calling him my friend. And so over the years, now that they're both adults, they have that relationship, which is great. Okay, now the news about Maria. Well, Kislovodsk was in the Caucasus, so I suppose that's why Dmitri's thinking that she might be able to come to Tehran, not because anybody had said, she's trying to work her way to Tehran, but just because Kislovodsk would be, a good starting point for her to get to Tehran, I guess. As we know, she would never end up going to Tehran, but they would be reunited in London. Okay, so the Etter brothers, Nikolai was the one who was the Russian minister to Persia. His brother Alexander was the one who was attached to Michan's court or entourage, or however you want to put it. And so Alexander Etter was with Michan, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna the Elder, there in Kislovodsk. And the information is apparently a little imprecise, because Dmitri isn't sure whether Maria and Putyatyn are already there or whether they are on their way. But it's a relief to him. That's very understandable. What I don't understand is that he doesn't ask the question of why his sister would leave their father. And I'm not blaming her. I'm not blaming him. I think that his priority is that his sister is vulnerable. She's a woman. This is the mindset of the day, and he just wants her. He was closer to her than his father, and he just wants her out of danger, and that's certainly understandable. But it kind of surprises me that he doesn't ask the question. Anyway, moving on. So there's once, possibly twice, that he mistakes Kornilov for Kerensky. So K names, and the other K name is Kaledin. So it's certainly, especially if he's a little upset while he's writing this, certainly is not surprising that he does that. So we have another named source for information, or rather for misinformation, which is the newspaper published in Baku called Caspia. Dmitri has referred to it before. And apparently, it wasn't just General Baratov and the Russian troops in Kazvin. It was throughout the Caucasus. Apparently, extrapolating from this, throughout the Caucasus, people had gotten this misinformation about what was going on back in Russia. And, as a historian, one of the most valuable things I see in this part of the diaries, aside from just the ways in which I'm fascinated by Dmitri's experience, is that it really shows how the challenges and the successes and misfires of someone who is very, very intently seeking information, and a reasonable person, a person who's not engaging in denial, wishful thinking, yes, but not denial, and who's including, everything, not just what he'd want to hear. It's a skill that more of us should have, especially in this day and age when you can tune in on sources of information that seem very convincing, that are just telling you what you want to hear. But he makes this miscalculation when he says that only financial information is reliable, and that's not true. And I think, not only is it not true in this instance, but it's not true in general. You can't look at the stock market and say, aha, our economy is great on that basis, which is essentially what he's doing, although with foreign exchange. Okay, so what do we have next time? Well, we are going to have a focused look at Italy. Once again, Dmitri is fascinated by that. He's not talking about other things on the Western Front. He's really focused on this disaster that had happened in Italy for whatever reason. And narrowing things down, he's also going to talk about what the situation is in Tehran with the famine and public unrest and need for food. All right, so I hope you will come back for that, and I'll see you then. Bye.